Howdy, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about mistakes I've made and the lessons I learned from them. So, it's no surprise to anyone that just like in any other career, as a musician, as a guitarist, whatever you are, you're going to make mistakes. It's just part of the game, it's how you learn. And it's really important to learn from your mistakes. So, I thought I'd share with you 4 mistakes that I made early on in my career as a musician that taught me principles that I apply on an almost daily basis. The first is probably the simplest one to correct for, and it's based around this pedal right here. I bought this pedal when I was 14 years old, the day of a gig that I had where it was going to be an hour set, an intermission, and then an hour. And I was so excited because it was my first pedal. It was an overdrive pedal, and it made the guitar it made my guitar sound super crunchy, which I just, before I had to go to the amp and adjust the amp. So this was a big deal for me. And I was so excited to use it. I tried it out at Guitar Center, bought it. Boom, let's go. As I'm being driven to the gig because I'm 14 and my parents are driving me, I'm reading the instruction manual on this and I notice that it says to make sure that you unplug from the input jack because if you don't, it will drain the battery. So I have that in my mind. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take good care of this thing. I get through sound check. We have probably about a half hour before we play. So I go ahead and I unplug from the side. And just to be safe, I unplug from the other side. Many of you probably know where this is going. I get back on stage and I pick up my guitar and I plug it in. And what I had done is I had reversed the input and the output. I put my guitar into the output, amp into the input, and it didn't work. I saw it turning on, I saw the little light turning on, but no sound was coming out. And I delayed the show by like 10 minutes because I was 14. And also because I was just frantically trying to figure out what the problem was. I decided to just go without it, plug directly into the amp, and deal with it that way. After intermission, I looked at it again, and I realized the mistake that I had made. I felt dumb, obviously, and plugged it in and played the next set, and it was fine. But it taught me a really valuable lesson. And this lesson is one that even in college, on the very first day of the commercial music program at the school I went to, they told us that about 30% of your career as a musician is going to be spent troubleshooting technology. And that has remained 100% true to this day. It could be something as simple as input versus output. And that's probably the first lesson, is to check the simple things first. You never know if it's just, oh, I forgot to turn the preamp on. Oh, my amp is still on standby. Oh, my volume pot is still turned down on my guitar. There are a number of simple tasks and simple things that we do every day as musicians that we could totally leave out, and we all have. I know I have. I've played a show where the volume pot was turned down and couldn't figure out why there was no sound. I've left the amp on standby. I've done all these things. I've made countless mistakes, and the biggest lesson that I learned is to start with the simple things. Is it on? Yes or no? Is it plugged in? Yes or no? May sound dumb, but seriously, it saves you so much time if you don't try to look for the complicated solution. The other side of that is understanding that it could escalate. I know in the first apartment that I moved into after I got married, I set up my whole studio system back here with my speakers, and there was this insane humming coming out of my monitors. I tried to figure out what it was, constantly, unplugging things, plugging things back in, testing cables, doing all the simple stuff, and I didn't know what was going on. So I finally reached out on a Facebook page to a group of other audio engineers, and I said, hey guys, I'm having this problem. Turns out that there's this ground loop that can occur. And for me at that time, I had never heard of what a ground loop was or that it was even a thing. He told me to go buy this little 99-cent part that temporarily lifted the ground circuit on a normal 3-pronged plug and made it so that it would allow that signal to flow through instead of looping. And that solved the problem. The next step was, once you've bought that 99-cent part and you find out that that's what the problem is, once you figured that out, then you had to buy another device that went on the end of your plug and was called a hum debugger. and got rid of that hum while still providing a safe circuit. So I had no idea what was going on. I had to lean to other people for that one, but I made sure that I eliminated all of my common problems first. So that is the first mistake and the first lesson, which is look for the simple solution first. The second mistake that I made early on is one that I'm sure a lot of younger musicians make when they're trying to figure out how to market themselves as a business. When you start doing recording projects, studio sessions, just plain flat out gigs, you're going to find yourself in a lot of situations where you have to negotiate with someone about your price. And it can be really intimidating because you're new to it. You know you're going to make mistakes, or maybe you're really confident, who knows? But you know that you're new, and they know that you're new. And so they're going to try to figure out, how much is my money really worth with this individual? And I can tell you that very early on, there were very few times that I valued myself correctly. Now, this is something we all go through, and it's important to go through because you have to know where you stand. There are so many times in, whether you go to school for music or you watch a bunch of YouTube videos like me, where people tell you to never play for free or to always value yourself at a certain level, right? There's all these things that the older musicians tell you is how they made it. And what I soon discovered is that free isn't necessarily terrible when you're starting out, because you need the experience more than anything else. If you can do it for a little bit of money, great. But if your whole business revolves around networking, then you probably don't want to screw over someone because you're inexperienced and overcharge them and ruin that relationship. It's better to be upfront and honest and say, hey, I'm new to this, but I'm really eager to learn and I'd like to forge a relationship. So I'm willing to do this for $20 an hour instead of the industry standard of, say, $50 an hour or whatever it is where you live. If you'll be patient with me and we can work through this together. Some people will go for it, some people won't. The next thing that I would say is, when you are starting out, it's really important to be self-aware, to understand where you're coming from, to know your strengths and your weaknesses, and to work with people, because this is an industry that relies on people. It's not machines. It's not anything else. At its core, it will always be people. So when you start working with others, it's best to maybe undervalue yourself and over-deliver in order to create that relationship. Someone who knows your worth will not hesitate to pay more money for you. So in summary on that one, it is, when you're starting out, to focus more on the relationship that you're building rather than sticking to what your professors or your mentors may have told you. So in summary, the second mistake was maybe overcharging when I was a younger musician and then under-delivering. It just leaves a bad taste in someone's mouth when they hire you for something like that. Start small, prove to them your worth, still get paid if you can, but over-deliver, and they will not hesitate to pay more for you when you raise your rates. That mistake leads us perfectly into the next mistake that I made early on, which has to do with networking. It's probably true that 50% of your career will be built on the relationships that you make in all of your interactions. Early on, especially in school, I decided to sit back. I didn't want to make friends. I just wanted to get through and not worry about anything. And that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made. When I finally figured out and saw the error of my ways around my junior or senior year of college and started making friends, I soon found that, number one, I was creating music and creating projects that were significantly better than anything that I could have created on my own. And number two, I discovered that I had created a little network of people that all wanted to work together and all wanted to create a career out of this. And by working with them early on and doing projects where maybe we weren't getting paid a lot or weren't getting paid at all, when the projects came around where we were getting paid, they were 100% more likely to call me up and say, hey, I need some guitar work and the budget is this, so I have room for you. Do you want it? Networking is crucial. It's another thing that I discovered when I joined this band, Michael Barrow and the Tourists. I first started with them by subbing for one of their band members who had taken a leave of absence from the band, and they had a couple gigs they had to play. So I joined, played a few shows, and immediately what I noticed is that instead of sitting back in the green room and avoiding people, they were out on the floor talking to as many people as they could, remembering their names. They were responding to people on Instagram. They were talking to the other band members, and that was just something I had never really done before. But what it did is it provided an opportunity for the audience, for the band members, to the sound engineer at the venue, to everyone to feel like they could approach them. And in doing so, it made them want to listen to us more. As soon as I discovered that that was how that band operated, I changed my ways in every bit of my business. Every interaction that I walk away from, I try to make sure that they know that I know them, that I know their name, or I tried to learn their name. I'm really terrible with names. But I tried really hard to make sure that everyone knew me, knew that I was friendly, and knew that I could really be approached. Now, there are a lot of people in the industry who can seem standoffish and things like that, and they probably do all right for themselves with the connections that they do make. But I know for me, there are some producers who I don't like to work with simply because I don't know if they even like me or not. If they pay me, great, but I'm less inclined to do them a favor if they're in a pinch or something like that, because every interaction that I've had with them, I feel like I'm draining the life out of them. So always, always, always remember that this is a business built on people. I've said it before, I'll say it again 1,000 times. If you want people to listen to you, to like you, to hire you, you have to be a person too. There's no way around it. Last, but certainly not least, has to do with confidence. I've been talking a lot about school in this episode, and it's simply because it sets a really big precedent for how you conduct your business, and there's lots of people telling you what you should and shouldn't do, so it can have a pretty lasting effect on your self-view. At the college I attended, they had a school of music, and then within that school of music, they had the commercial music program. So, in order to get into the School of Music, you had to audition on an instrument or voice. In order to get into the commercial music program, you had to submit a portfolio of 3 songs that you had either arranged or written and have a resume, and it was, about this thick of just stuff that you had done and were willing to do, explain how and why you made the choices you made on those tracks, and submit that to the commercial music program. And more often than not, what happened is they would let people into the School of Music, and then after their first year, they would have to reapply to the commercial music program, and then they would kind of start their commercial music program early on. Now, I wasn't always the strongest player. I had a background in trumpet more so than guitar, and made a, whether foolish or smart decision, we'll never really know, but I switched to guitar because I liked it more. It's that simple. And in doing so, I discovered that I was kind of behind from everyone else that was taking lessons or auditioning for the School of Music. And I kind of went in knowing that I probably wouldn't be the best player. So that year it came around for auditions, and I had already submitted my commercial music portfolio. And I went in, I auditioned, and the teacher who I had already been taking with, who sat there in the audition, told me after a week or two that they had picked someone else to fill the one jazz spot that they had, and that I probably wouldn't make it into the School of Music. And then about a week later, she came back to me and she said, actually, your commercial music portfolio was so good that they've decided to make an exception for you. So immediately, what I felt was, okay, I'm in the School of Music, but not for guitar. I'm in the School of Music because I'm a good songwriter and a good producer. And so for years, I had so little confidence about myself as a guitar player. I would sit in group lessons with all of the guitar students, and I would just feel terrible about myself because I just couldn't play jazz as well as they could. Now, they were all older than me, so that makes sense, but it just wasn't clicking for me. So I decided that I would brand myself as the songwriter and producer and ignore the fact that while I loved guitar, I just wasn't the best player. What I soon discovered was that out of the 2 students that they let into the School of Music every year for guitar, after about 2 years of being in the program, usually one of them dropped out. and it was usually the jazz player. So even though they were incredibly talented, played better than me, and could solo circles around me, I was staying around and I was still working hard. And while I don't know that I ever made it to their level as far as jazz is concerned, I also discovered that as far as my pop and rock and blues sensitivities on the guitar were concerned, I could solo circles around them. My feel was significantly better. So just because I couldn't play super fast or, have the tastiest licks, I had branded myself as someone who was terrible at guitar when in actuality, I ended up being a way more solid player in a band or in a recording studio than those guys because I was consistent. So the reason I say this is because I made a mistake. I undervalued myself and thought that I wasn't good enough to do something when in actuality, what it really was I was just unprepared. I think that a lot of times we say, oh, I can't do this, or oh, I'm not good enough for this, when in actuality, what it is I'm just not there yet. Now it's gotten to the point where I've made more money from playing and teaching guitar than I have from any of those songwriting or production projects that I've ever worked on. The reason why is because I was really easy to work with, and I also learned. I grew and I got to find some of those tasty licks. I got to get to the point where I could solo and I was confident about my soloing. So early on, if there's something that you love and that you're interested in, be self aware enough to accept that you may not be where everyone else is. But be confident enough in your ability to learn and network and do all the things that we've talked about in this video, and you'll get hired, which will provide you with more opportunities to learn and grow. And if you over deliver every single time, you will always have work. And that's a promise that what a mentor gave to me early on was, regardless of pay, if you always give every project your absolute 100% effort, there will always be another job at the end. And that has remained true to this day. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I know this was kind of a longer one, but these are some really significant things that turned and changed how I approached my business, my career, and overall just my playing as a guitarist. So, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, click the bell, all that stuff, and we'll see you next time.